For this mock exercise, we're going to take a look at variable overhead and fixed overhead variance. And we're going to take a look at a case called time savers. So let's start with the question. Okay, so let's start with the question. Time Saver operates a personal home and mail delivery service. It has agreements with 20 restaurants to pick up and deliver meals to customers who phone or faxed an order. Time Savers currently examines its overhead costs for May 2010. Consumers are charged $12 per delivery, that's the sales, which is not really relevant in answering this question because we're all asked to look at just efficiency and spending variance for both variable and fixed overhead. Okay? The delivery is paid $7, that's the actual, and TS, Time Saver, receives 10% commission on the meals the restaurant charged the customer who uses TS. Now here's the meat part of answering this question. This is variable cost for May 2010 were budgeted to be $2 per hour. So this is the standard. So variable manufacturing overhead, standard. And fixed overhead was budgeted at $28,800. That's the fixed cost. The budgeted number of home deliveries was 9,600. So we're going to take this number divided by 9,600 deliveries to come up with a rate. Okay? Now, it does say, though, that the delivery time, the allocated base for variable and fixed overhead is budgeted to be 8.8 hours for delivery. So there are 9,600 deliveries, but each delivery requires 0.8 hour per delivery. So we do need to multiply this by 0.80 to determine the rate, hourly rate per delivery, and that is $3.75 per hour of delivery time. So this is a very important because this is the fixed rate. That's the fixed rate. Here are the actual results. So we end up with 17,008 of variable overhead. That's how much we spent. Fixed overhead is 33,120. The number of deliveries, okay, went from 9,600. We actually only did 8,952 deliveries. And the number of hours that it took us to deliver is 6,714. So the first part is asking us to compute these variance analysis. So let's do that. So let's start with variable overhead. So what is the actuals? What did we incur? We incurred how much? We incurred 17,008. This is given according to, I put a letter G beside it. Now, what's the flexible budget? Flexible budget is all about actual output. Actual output is what? How many deliveries do we end up doing? It's 8,952 actual deliveries. What was the standard input for that actual output? each delivery standard should be 80.80 per hour. And it's supposed to cost us $2 for variable overhead. Okay? So the standard says each delivery is budgeted to cost $2 per hour, and each delivery is 8.8 hours per delivery. So make sense? Okay? That gives me 14,323. Now, I need to, again, to get the spending and efficiency, I need to create a third column called actual input times budgeted price. So, how do we deal with this? How many hours of delivery time did we actually spend? We spent 6,714 hours. Times, what was the budgeted price per hour? Or the budget price per hour of variable overhead is $2. So the difference between these two is what we call spending variance. And that is a 3,508 or 580, sorry, 3,580 unfavorable. Why is it unfavorable? I spent more than I should have. Another way to calculate this one is to say, okay, what are the difference in the rate? So how do I know what the rate of this one is? Well, we know this has got to be 17,008 divided by 6,714. That gives me a rate of $2.533 per variable overhead, isn't it? So this is determined by taking 2.533, the rate for variable overhead hours, minus 2, times 6,714. This gives us 3,580 unfavorable because the rate, actual rate, is more. Now, this is what we call the efficiency variance. And how do we calculate that? Well, that's the difference between these two. And it looks like we've got an 895 efficiency favorable variance. Now, how do we calculate the per unit? Well, we know that the $2 is the budgeted times the difference between the actual input, 6,714, how many delivery hours, minus these two, 8,952 times 0.80. That gives me 895 favorable. So there are multiple different ways to get to the same number, but we're just going to do it this way, the column approach. The fixed overhead, what was the actual? The actual fixed overhead is, we know that we spent 33,120. Now, what is the flexible budget? The flexible budget should always equal the static budget, because we know that with fixed costs, it doesn't matter whether the flexible is static, it's going to be fixed within that relevant range of activities. So that would equal the fixed budget of 28,800. That was given to us, right? So automatically we know there is no variance, but we do have a spending variance between these two of 4,320 unfavorable. we spent more than we should have. Now, because we treat the fixed costs as a per unit rate, we're going to determine what we actually allocated. What did we allocate? We allocated, how many deliveries did we actually make? We made 8,952 deliveries times 0.80 per hour times, we did that $3.75, right? We calculated what the rate was for fixed overhead. So we actually allocated 26,856. So that is what we call the product volume variance. And that product volume variance is unfavorable because we allocated less. Because remember, we had less number of deliveries than we originally budgeted. Think about this. The rate of 375 was based on 9,600 deliveries. We only did 8,952, so naturally we allocated less. By allocating less means we have an unfavorable variance, which means that we need to further expense into our cost of goods sold. Thank you.